Thank you for attending discussion on water resources strategies for the town. So I'm Sean Cruz Weisner, the Utilities Director. I've been with the town about 7 years, and I'm just want to acknowledge that we have several council members here. I don't want to call them all out right now because we do have a council meeting after this. And this is why we sort of have the awkward setup. We don't want it to have to do too much rework after to get to the council meeting. Our town manager is also here, Grady Miller. And then our goal here is to give you an update on our overall water strategies for the town. Obviously, on tonight's agenda is also the next rate increase. So we're going to talk about that at the end. Just some logistics. If we can, if you have comments, if you want to write comments down, but after the presentation, we'll go through those comments and we'll leave it an open forum. But we want to leave a little bit of time before the council meeting just to clear the room up a little bit before that meeting starts again. On tonight's agenda is the rate increase going tonight. So I'll give a bit of a briefing tonight, but actually during the session tonight is actually the action item. So tonight, what we're dealing right now is not the action item. So this is really a briefing. I'll just give an update on that at the end of the presentation. So we have about half an hour to get through. And I appreciate if you, again, hold your comments to the end because we're going through a lot of information. And I think as we've previewed this presentations, people have asked questions. I said, give me 4 slides and I'll just present that to you. So let us get through that. And then we'll take any questions and go from there. And I want to my left is Brad Hill. He's our water resource consultant. And we also have our water resource attorney, Michelle Van Quatham, in the room also to answer questions. So with that, we will start. Let's see here. Let's get the logistics down. So again, we've already gone through our introductions. And this is our agenda for tonight. We're going to talk about the CAP reductions, Central Arizona Project. That's the Colorado River allocations. So that's one of the big things. We've been talking about this pretty much since I've been with the town about what's happening. So now it's coming through. We're getting to the point that it will be a reality sometime in 2027. So we're talking about what we've been doing and working on for planning for the town's water resources and the water future. And we're talking about some of the long-range plans we're talking about. I know there's a few that are really important for the town right now, including our Bartlett Dam project and then our participation in the Harquahala Valley project, which we actually have to make a decision. So I'll give some information about that. And then I'll just stop off there and just do talk briefly about the utility rates and why we need those and then what is being proposed right now. So with that.
All right, good evening. Sean mentioned my name is Brad Hill. I'll just give you a little background. I've been in the Arizona water business for 38 years as a hydrologist and as doing Sean's job. So very familiar, and I'm a consultant too. Well, not for Cave Creek, but for other municipalities. So thanks again for all of you attending. So what they asked me to do here is to give you a little bit of a brief statement of the problem, if you will, that impacts both the state of Arizona and then how it impacts you here in Cave Creek. So there are 2 issues that are coming at the end of this calendar year. One is the hydrology side on the Colorado River, and the other is the agreements that all the 7 basin states that you see on this map that make up the Colorado River Basin and the federal government. All of those are kind of coming together at the end of this year, or where we're saying here is January 2027. Essentially, what's happening, I'm sure you've heard, due to the hydrology drought on the Colorado River, declining flows in the river have impacted the state's abilities to withdraw all of the water that they're legally entitled to. And so because of this, and the importance of that is Cave Creek gets the majority of its supply from the Colorado River via Central Arizona Project. So what this means today is there's going to be anticipated reductions come January 27, which in our business isn't that far away. So I've been solicited to help Sean and the town work on ideas and options and solutions. We don't want to identify the problem as I just done without any solutions. So we're going to present some of that in a couple more slides. So with that statement, I'll turn it back over to Sean.
Thank you, Brad. And one other acknowledgement I want to make, I realize we actually have some members of the town's utility advisory committee here tonight. So that's the board that's been, the town council has actually asked public and they volunteered to actually help with water resource and water related issues for the town. So I see some members here. So Brad's framed the problem. So how is that actually, what's that mean for Cave Creek? So this is a summary of sort of our water resources. That's the legal available water that we have access to. The town has two subcontracts to get access to Colorado River water. There's called our CAP, Central Arizona Project subcontracts. We have municipal and industrial water, and we also have a non-Indian agricultural water. Well, they're separated out. They're actually different priorities. So we can't rely as much on the NIA water as we can the municipal and industrial supplies. That's how that works. So we also have groundwater in Desert Hills. So the Desert Hills water system was started in the 70s on groundwater wells. The Cave Creek system was actually also started in the 50s on groundwater wells, but they converted to surface water supplies in 1990 when they got an allocation, the municipal industrial water supply, and then built the pipeline up Cave Creek Road and built the water treatment plant in the town core. So as of right now, the cuts that are being proposed are, and just educate, we'll probably post these slides on our website. So if you want to do that too, so we'll make those available as public presentations. We'll just post it on the website, probably through news outreach to everybody. We're hearing, I think before we've talked about it in their master planning process, we've talked about up to 20, even more percent cuts, 25% cut is what we were last time we did this presentation. Right now, we're being told 20% is most anticipated cut that will come to the Colorado River allocation to the state, which will then come back down to the town's subcontracts that we have for water. What does that mean to the town? A 20% cut in our municipal and industrial water supplies. You'll notice on there the NIA, the non-Indian agricultural water, is zero. That is less reliable water. As of this upcoming calendar year, the calendar year we're right now, they actually do orders by calendar year. They said we could not order any of that water. While we've had excess water for the last several years, we've been recharging that. So any portion of the M&I allocation that's unused and the NIA water that's been unused, we've been putting into recharge. But this calendar year, we were told we can't order any NIA, and we anticipate that for the next foreseeable number of years. So that's not as reliable a supply. The real takeaway here is that with what's being proposed in the reductions to the Colorado River supplies, the town is very dependent on our Colorado River. Over 90% of our water resources are tied to that. That we're in a position where that's getting close to and or less than what we have in current customer demands. So this table I just actually updated, and Ryan Hill from our staff actually just did the numbers for us. We just completed our 2025 numbers. So how much water did we need to provide to customers last year? Just under 2,000 acre feet of Central Arizona Project was delivered to our customers. That's delivered to Desert Hills, Cave Creek, and also some of the other water transfers you do, and that's including getting beneficial use out of the waste stream from water treatment plant to help for irrigation use at Rancho Mañana. That's down a little bit from our 24 numbers, which was just over 2,100. We looked at that and we were surprised to see that. Part of that goes back to we were actually able to run the Desert Hills wells more last year to get more production capacity out of them. And then there was actually a decrease in the amount of water used by Rancho Mañana Golf Course. So between those two factors, that saved us a little bit of water. So that helped out. How long we can anticipate those two factors to occur is a struggle for us, especially the well water in Desert Hills. We don't think that's a good long-term reliable supply. So that's what makes us very nervous when we look out for water supplies. We have to look out for longer term, not the next 5 years, 10 years. We're looking out actually if we approve a subdivision plat, it actually has to be 100-year assured water supply we're signing off on for. And at the bottom of this table, I'm showing, it's one thing we've talked about before, is what's the future commitments to the town? What are other demands that are needed out there? And this came actually out of our master planning efforts. So we looked at existing subdivisions, and those are, lot splits that have more than, I think it's 5 lots or 4 lots in the town that require a final plat. We actually have a number of final platted areas in the town that were platted prior to 1980, which is the Groundwater Management Act in the state. And they show that Cave Creek Water is their water supplier. After 1980, they were required to get what's called a Certificate of Assured Water Supply. A cause is what and you'll hear, and I'll try not to use as vernacular here, but I'll slip into it. If I do, Brad can hit me or you guys can put your hand up and I'll explain it. So we have subdivisions that have water dedicated to them. They actually have a certificate that was issued by the state that says, yes, you will give up some of your water resources to that development. Some of them are not fully developed and some are. In the master planning, we came up with a number of 827 acre feet of new demands over and above what we have customer demands on right now. If we actually take into all those pots, the existing subdivisions with and without certificates. And also there's a West Side DeWibb area, Domestic Water Improvement District area. And that's some properties along 32nd, 36th Street on the west side that were promised water by the town years ago. So we included that in that. We also looked with the master plan a little further. We looked at vacant lots that were within 500 feet of the existing distribution system to say, okay, well, what happened if property owners start to see things like a decline in their private wells? What would that number be? And that came up to 504 acre feet of demand additional. And then we went next step further and say, okay, how about if all the vacant lots, either undeveloped or not connected to the water system lots, existing property owners who have wells that want to connect to the water system, what would that be? And if we go beyond the 500-foot buffer, then we're adding another 377 acre feet. So again, if we want to provide water services to every potential customer in the town, every potential citizen, that's another over 870 acre feet of water in addition to what we currently have banked on. So that's where we're trying to frame the argument, the discussion, not an argument, of what do we need. So with that, through the master planning effort, we were able to come up with some good ideas. And I want to sort of walk through. We've been working on this for a number of years. The master planning really helped us tie it all down, which we completed in November of 24 is when we got that adopted. But we've been working on this for a number of years. And I'll let Brad explain sort of the graphics to help explain what's going on or help visualize what we're dealing with.
So I have a few of these slides, and I did it in two ways. One that are visual people, that's the bar charts on top, and then one that are numbers people. So we also give you the numbers down below, and currently I have the numbers blinked out. So and all of the graphs look identical to this. So once I lay out what you're looking at, you'll be able to track. So from left to right on the bar charts is from 2025, looking into the future. The analysis of this is looking at what's the available supplies that Cave Creek has to the demands that the customers use water today and into the future. And as you'll see these bar charts, if you look at the left, excuse me, I need two more lines. So there's a yellow horizontal line, which is the water use today that Sean just talked about. There is a green line that is water use projected into the future, meaning future customers. So if the bars are above the green line and yellow line, that means good. You have sufficient supplies. And that's one of the takeaways I want you to leave with is the town has sufficient supplies if it wasn't for the issues that are going on the Colorado River. And this bar chart helps to show that. But what you'll see quickly as you go to the right is the red above the existing customers today. And those are going to use the term shortage or reduce supplies. But you'll hear me use the term shortage. At the bottom for the numbers people, the top is going to be the numbers of how much we're projecting to be short, both existing customers and future. And then what are those different supplies that we've identified that the town can look at as a future development. And then we have a list of the existing supplies that are already being used, and then the demand projections, which are the green and the yellow line. So with that, I'm just going to step through a couple of these. So when we first look at a 20%, so the current negotiations between the upper and lower basin, meaning that map of the 7 basin states, is 20%, and that's in 2027. So you'll notice instantly we go into what we're terming as shortage. That's the first dashed on the left circle. Not with existing customers at the moment under this analysis, but the data is so close on existing projected supplies and demands that I wouldn't quite say it's zero for the remaining years, but that's what the numbers show. And then you'll see farther out is where the numbers in 2031 show an actual where we think existing customers. If you want to show the next. So this is what we really think is going to happen. If it's not 2027, then it's going to be 2028. Because if you've heard anything in the news, the hydrology on the Colorado River isn't looking too good. Meaning what's going on in Colorado, Wyoming, and Utah, the headwaters to the Colorado River. So we're planning for deeper shortages on the Colorado. Therefore, the impacts are deeper to people that use Central Arizona project like Cave Creek. Well, what you want to draw your attention to is that circle, and that is the town immediately comes into a shortage on existing customers. So we have been working diligently under the new water supply. As I said, we never want to identify and take to city council, here's the problem, and we don't have a solution. In fact, we have several solutions, but they all each have issues associated with to make them actually perfected, meaning available come January of 27. So here's just a quick example of if we put some of these supplies together, what does it do for us? So here are supplies, and Sean's going to talk more about these in detail, but at the highest level, you'll see Cape Creek groundwater, and there's those little blue bars, horizontal bars, long-term storage credit recovery, and that's via exchange. And we're working with some valley cities that have been very West Valley cities. And then water bank. And we're going to kind of talk a little bit about each of those. So if we can get the legal agreements in place to satisfy, we can begin to push the impacts of the shortages farther out. And that's really the takeaway message that I want you all to understand, that there may be shortages to existing customers come next year, for sure, in future customers, and we have some solutions of what we are diligently working on, and we'll be bringing those to council when they're ready.
That we've actually brought some of them to council based on our capital programming that we've already done. So, yeah, we've been talking about this, and a lot of this came out of the master plan. So we do have projects. They're not new projects, it's stuff we've been working on. So I'm going to run through a few of them. So, just right now, what's really ongoing is we want to work with the existing customers on outreach and education. I think we've been doing good, but we can do better as far as, understanding what the issue is and then asking for people to participate, to actually help lower their water usage. If everybody contributes a little bit, that helps the community, helps out. We've talked about restarting the wells, so we're trying to get down to physical infrastructure improvements on that. The Cave Creek water system was started in the 50s on groundwater wells. The aquifer that we draw off of, the Cave Creek Carefree Aquifer, has some issues with it, and we actually happen to be at a shallow portion of it, but we do believe we can get some wells functionally operational to help us bridge the gap. What we're concerned about is the long-term viability of those wells, but I still think it's worth the investment. The viability being the water production may decrease and the water quality may become an issue, so we have to deal with both issues. We talk about water banking and the water resource world. That means we put in water into the ground. We've saved water that we had and we put it somewhere. In our case, we actually have 2 recharge facilities that we work with Central Arizona Project, and for a number of years, we've been actually putting unused portions of our allocation into the ground, into those 2 recharge facilities. So now we're trying to get the agreements in place to allow us to get physical access to that water and how we can get that water delivered to the town. And then we also want to work with our largest water users in the town. There's actually several between both the town and Desert Hills that we have some very large water users. Like in Desert Hills, we actually have a school district that's tied to our system. So how do we work with them to reduce their overall water demands? And we are continually working to update the supplies and what we've got available to us. This is not a static chart, and even these charts that Brad is presenting, they're always in flux as we move through different options. Those are just ongoing projects. And we've got other projects that we started or we're considering right now. Again, the water exchanges is a key one for us. We've come to that conclusion. If we've put water, effectively, think of a checking account, we've been putting water into our checking account. Now we need to do withdrawals to actually help us bridge. So how do we get legal access to that water? The recharge facilities that we actually been placing them in are actually, one's called the Hieroglyphics Facility, 163rd Avenue by Grand Avenue. The other's called the Agua Fria Facility, which is Happy Valley Road, 107th. They're outside the town's municipal limits. So how do we get access to that water? So we're working with the municipalities that surround those facilities on exchange agreements where we'd pay them for withdrawing, using their wells to actually pull water out of the ground, which should be recovering our water and then leaving some of their CAP water on that will allow it to come down the canal to us. So, those are really key agreements to us. And the other thing is that actually gives us access to the Arizona Water Banking Authority. That's, and I think I have a more detailed slide later, and I'll talk about that. But that's an agency that was set up by the state to actually recharge and actually has a bank of water that hopefully we can access also. We're looking at the Bartlett Dam project, and I'll talk more about details of that, and Harquahala Valley, and I've got more details on that too. And then can continue, we're going to look at other exchange agreements. local, state, federal. There's other agreements being discussed. There's a lot being discussed in the water world. It's been discussed for a number of years, but it's really accelerating right now. So we're going to keep our eyes open for anything that the town has can jump on, including looking for future purchases of additional CAP supplies or Colorado River rights. You know, the Central Arizona project only has rights to about, I think, about half the state's portion of the Colorado River. There's actually the other half goes to, there's Indian tribes, there's other agencies that have access to that. So can we just do an exchange agreement and buy water from somebody else and then work with the CAP to get it transmitted to us? So there's a number of ways we can solve this problem. I want to highlight a little bit on the public outreach and what we're trying to do. I like this. Again, we're introducing Cactus Charlie. One of the things that came out of the Utility Advisory Committee was, a mascot, a Cave Creek specific mascot. So we came up with a really nice one. One of our members actually, one of his family members actually came up with that. So we're looking at, we're trying to work with customers to get outreach materials out there. We're going to do some education, some additional work to try and get to at least a voluntary 5% reduction. Because the cuts may be deeper than we're anticipating, we might have to get into or go into higher reductions, and those might be both voluntary and required. And required, I mean by the town actually had put in place in 2022 our drought management plan. So if cuts go deep enough, there's a list of things that are in town code that allows us, the authority and council, to authorize us to go after and to do that, to require people to make that. We're hopeful we can do it voluntarily with people. We don't want to go into mandatory, but we've been actually working on things to put things in place for town code to help us. If we get into a real shortage, we need everybody to participate and jump in and help us out. We want to, again, focus on the highest water users. The ones, that's where the almost 90% of the customer base in Cave Creek for water system is residential demand. There are some high residential customers, but there's also some high commercials and non-commercials, like the school I mentioned out in Desert Hills. So we think our biggest bang for the dollar is to go after them and work with them, not go after them, but work with them. We have some funds right now in the current operating budget to go develop that outreach program. We're probably going to help, because of staff resources, go out and do a solicitation to help bring in firms that can help us do education outreach, and then also help us work on the numbers behind the scenes and help us do that focus work. Part of the focus is going out to residential customers, helping them do education. We know a lot of the water use is outdoor water use. So how can we work and educate with our customers to lower their outdoor water use? That helps save the water demands. And then for commercial customers, what can they do to actually help their water use? Is it looking and doing an audit of their fixtures and seeing if they can be more efficient and providing those tools to them to be more efficient? And then we'll continue to work with our advisory board to actually develop this as we go forward. One of the big things for water conservation is our metering upgrade project. And I think I've talked to nauseam about this, but I think it's such a value to the town. So we were able to get a federal grant that helped us fund half the project cost of upgrading the Cave Creek water meters. A lot of them had functionally failed and were under reporting. When a meter fails, 99.9% of the time we'll under report. That meant that we didn't have full accounting of customers' water usage, and we needed to correct that. But in addition to that, we did a leap in technology. We had what was called the drive-by system. So instead of manual reading the meters, they were set up with little radio antennas, but we had to be within a certain proximity with a vehicle to actually pick that up. We've now done the next leap to an AMI, automatic metering infrastructure. That's effectively, we've got collector sites up that are actually listening for the meters. They're putting out a radio signal and they can listen to it. In some cases, we actually had to put cellular antennas on some of our meters. So they're sending signals up, and the collectors and or cellulars are sending that up to the web. And we're actually seeing up to hourly usage out of a lot of our customers. So as of this point, over 60% of our customer base, and it's mostly Cave Creek, is that 60% is we're seeing hourly data out of that. Now it's the real great results. You'll see on that map that some of the Desert Hills customers were getting picked up by the collector sites that we were able to put in place. We actually have monies in this year capital program to continue that exercise to pick up the Desert Hills customers. We didn't try to forget about Desert Hills. But we just, we have to put some collector sites to pick up their antennas. We focused on Cave Creek with the funds that we had. And we also set up a portal, the My360 portal. And if you're not on there, please get signed up for that. That gives you access to that data set. And then the benefits of the My 360 is that gives you as a user access to see your usage on an hourly basis. You can go in and set the system up so it sets you alerts. It can be daily, it can be hourly. It's just not doing hourly because you'll drive yourself crazy and the alarms will come at you. But set daily limits, weekly limits, other thresholds, or if you're going to be out of town, you can set a threshold to it's looking for usage. So you can identify leaks earlier and sooner, so we can work with you to address it, or you can address it yourself. So the current system was when we drive by your meter, we're reading your usage for that month, and it takes us 2 to 3 weeks to process and get the bills out. So you could have a leak that started at the beginning of our billing cycle, and it could be 6 to 7 weeks before we notify you via the billing system that you've got a leak. With the new AMI system, we're actually seeing that usage. We have staff that are looking at it. Ryan Hill in our office spends time at looking at that and looks for anomalies in the system. But we want to really empower the customers. We have 4,500 customers. We don't have time to look at all that. So we really need to have people looking at it. There's 294 people as of yesterday that were signed up for the system. Our hope is to get everybody signed up on it. And it's not just the people who have the AMI meters that could benefit from this, even the people with our drive-by. And in fact, as soon as we do the drive-by, that information is getting uploaded to the cloud. So while it takes us 2 or 3 weeks to process the bills, effectively as a drive-by user, you'd see the data 2 to 3 weeks before we could actually send you a bill and see it. So it still will benefit you. And as we upgrade the meters, you'll actually get the hourly data. So I encourage anybody who's got an account with Cave Creek Water, either be in our Desert Hills or our Cave Creek system, to sign up for the My 360 system. When we talk about water bridges, how do we bridge this gap that we talked about earlier? And then we see the problem coming, and we've come up with solutions. And we do think getting access to the town storage credits, the water that we've put underground, is key to helping us get by this. So that's the checking account that we've been working on for a few years. At the end of this year, we think we'll have about 3,200 acre feet in the ground. So again, I mentioned at the beginning of the slide, our full water usage was just cruising around 2,000 acre feet for cap water supply. So we have about a year and a half of water stored in the ground. The next thing is we need to get access to that water. And on top of the water that we've put in the ground, the Arizona Water Banking Authority has been doing that on behalf of the state since 1996. So that was an agency that was created. The state overall has actually been a good steward of water resources, which ironically is something that's getting used against the state in the discussions, in the Seven Basin state discussions, because they're saying, hey, you guys have been saving water and storing water. And they said, yeah, we knew there was going to be a problem. So we've been saying, so they've been using that against the state of Arizona, which is ironic. But the Water Banking Authority has been putting excess water into the ground. So the last number I saw is about 3.8 million acre feet that they have stored on behalf of municipal and industrial subcontractors. I think there's 54, 55 M&I subcontractors, and that was their mandate to put that water in the ground. The problem we're seeing is that they're also not mandated then to withdraw that and give it to those customers. Then they're talking about how they distribute those credits and then leaving it up to us to get access to it. And that's what we've been working on. We know the 2 facilities that we have water in. We know that the Water Banking Authority has water in those facilities. So we're working with 2 other adjacent agencies to come up with exchange agreements where they would utilize their infrastructure to withdraw our stored credits and then allow us to do an exchange with their CAP water. So effectively, we don't have all the CAP water. They would leave some of their CAP water and come down to us. We still have to pay them to do that, but it keeps the town wet. It keeps, I always go back to the analogy of wet water. Brad taught me that early in my career. We have paper water, legal rights to it, and I'm on the infrastructure wet water. I got to make sure you guys can turn your taps on. So we always have to think of both lenses of that. So that's a huge one for the town, and we actually are working on, hopefully in the next couple of months, being able to bring those forward. So they're in place before 27 hits, that we actually have those in place for tools. And ironically, the town is leading the charge on this in a lot of ways, because a lot of for the reductions in the Colorado River that most other agencies are addressing are more longer term. They're not seeing the impacts right away. And the best analogy I can have is we had a meeting with a lot of municipal industrial users that was hosted by the Arizona Department of Water Resources. And sitting next to the Scottsdale water resource person, he said, yeah, 80% of our supplies are tied with the Colorado River. And I said, well, I didn't want to win the competition, but we're 90%. And I didn't want to be on that. So we're directly impacted by this. So the town sadly is dealing with this issue first in the state, but I think we've got good things in place to allow us to get through this. That's what we want you to leave with tonight. And then we go into our long-term water resources. You know, and again, I sort of alluded to this, but we've got multiple things. We have to increase the town's water resources, our paper water, our ability to have access to legally available to water. And what are those water supplies? We're not sure, but that's one of the legs of the stool. I like the analogy of the three-legged stool. Physical access, my engineering training is how do I physically get that water to customers? But I need to be legally able, and Brad's taught me out over the years, you have to have legal rights to that. You just can't pull water out and do that somewhere. And the other thing the town needs to be looking at is diversifying our supplies. The water company, and then when the town bought system did good by actually converting to surface water from wells, because the wells weren't able to keep up with the groundwater supplies. But now we have a new problem facing us because that surface water supply is not as reliable as we once thought. So now we're into this next phase. That's why I think the three legs of the stool for our water resources. So the two big projects we're considering for longer term after we get past the bridge would be the modified Bartlett Dam and the Harquahala Valley groundwater projects. So here's a graphic of Harquahala, Bartlett Dam. And it shows where relative Bartlett Dam is. It's basically due east of the town's municipal limits is actually the Bartlett Dam on the Verde River. So the issue with Bartlett Dam is that there's two reservoirs on the Verde River, the Bartlett and the Horseshoe Reservoir. The Horseshoe Reservoir actually has been filled in with sedimentation. The reservoirs were originally constructed for stormwater control on the Verde River because flows can vary so much. So the sedimentation meant that it couldn't meet one of its prime functions, which is for storage for stormwater. So they did a large project to figure out what they can do. They looked at how could they dredge that out, remove the material, something else, and they concluded the best solution would be to actually raise Bartlett Dam, which you saw the graphic before. By raising that, and then if you're doing the project to construct a new dam, why not go a little bit higher and then gain some extra capacity, and then you can give other users that extra capacity. So that's what the gist of the project is that it's trying to solve a drainage related issue, stormwater drainage related issue, and they're building it higher so there's extra capacity for users. The town became a non-voting member in September of 2024. We requested 1,000 acre feet of storage capacity. And why I call that out differently is because that's maximum storage. They gave us a volume of they needed to hold back. But the average supply is only it's a factor of 3.5, so it's only 286 acre feet annually that we can, and even that is I'd say rely on, but it's the average. So there could be dry years on the Verde River where that 286 we don't get. So there's variability on that project. So that's a big unknown for that project. And the cost has gone up. If people remember when we did the presentation, we had SRP actually staff did a really good presentation on the project. Initially, this was discussed as like a $1.2 billion project. The most recent cost estimate that we were shared with is $3.7 billion for that project. That's $11.5 million for the 1,000 acre feet of storage that the town has requested. So it's the cost has gone up on that project, and as we participate and continue with it, that'll be our cost moving forward. The project is doing its feasibility report and environmental impact statement. There was a meeting not too many months ago. It was held over in Carefree in their hotel where they were doing the environmental impact statement where they had to do public outreach, and they're pulling that together. Their goal is to put the package, get through all the federal regulations that they need to get through to put a package to submit it to Congress for funding. So it's the end of 27, beginning of 28 is when they're hopeful that they can bring that forward. Because this project can't be done just on the users. The $3.7 million is the project's really actually been holding back and are hoping to get half of that funded by the federal government. The federal government is actually going to get half the water by the project too. They've actually made notice to us. So while we only requested 1,000 acre feet, the other 22 of the 24 partners, a lot of them are actually getting their allocations reduced, the amount that they requested, because the federal government has come now in. Finally, it only happened a couple months ago and said, yes, we want half the water. It's coming through the Bureau of Reclamation. So we're still at 1,000 acre feet, but the costs have gone up on that project. we still, so construction would start after the federal funding comes in place. And the way the contract is structured, our agreement with them is that we have to actually participate by having our funding to match them. So when they go to construction, they don't want us paying the invoices. They want us to front load their construction costs. So the town is faced with that. If we stay in the project, we'll have to make a decision by probably 2028 to actually have all that funding available for them. So that's something we're facing. The other project we're really considering is the Harquahala Valley groundwater project. The town signed a contract in October, I believe it was. We had been in discussions with the group out there for several months before that, and they finally gave us a contract that we could execute. And that was our goal, was to see if that has a value to the town. They have it's a groundwater basin. It's called an irrigation non-expansion area. NIA. That's actually a legally defined basin by the state of Arizona. So in the 1990s, they actually set aside, in 1980, the Groundwater Management Act went in place. In the 1990s, the state actually also set aside basins outside of the active management areas, and Phoenix happens to be an active management area. They're outside of it, and they're set aside as groundwater. And I hate to say the term, but they were set aside to be mined, to basically take the groundwater from those basins to bring into the active management areas to support future shortages. So it's legally all been put in place, and that's why the town, knowing about this project out there, thought it might be something worth us pursuing. So we had to actually execute the contract in order to get the information so we can make a proper decision. So the groundwater can be physically, legally imported into the Phoenix Active Management Area. Cave Creek is part of the AMA, so that gives us physical access to that. Here's a graphic of where Harquahala is. Again, I think I did a map quest from the town to get out to the property. Is about a 2-hour drive. So it's out there. I think the project that we're looking at is actually around 250th Avenue. It's past Palo Verde, so it's a ways out there. But this is one of the basins that was set aside by the state. You can see the black line is the Phoenix Active Management Area. You can see the town there. The real thing that intrigued us is the Central Arizona Project runs through Harquahala Valley. So now you've got a groundwater supply. You've got the CAP canal, which we actually have capacity on, but CAP can't meet their obligation to the town. They can't give us our non-union agricultural NA water, and they can't guarantee how much M&I water. So now we have excess capacity. Could we put groundwater in to make up that shortage? And that's really the gist of the project. And then we could utilize our existing infrastructure, our existing CAP pipeline, it brings it up to the town, to our treatment plant, and or our agreement with the city of Phoenix to have them divert, treat, and deliver our CAP water to us through the new City of Phoenix interconnect, which will go active this summer. So it's utilizing the existing infrastructure that the town has to basically augment the reductions of Colorado River water. So a little more details on the project itself. So the basin is fairly large. The project boundary you can see is highlighted on there on the graphic. It's sort of at the south east corner of the property. Is the project. They've assembled lands, and what they've done is they've made that the Harquahala Valley landowners, and they've said, well, we know that this water can be withdrawn and exported and used in the Phoenix metro area. How can we make this work? And they've gone through the exercise. They've been working on it for a number of years to get all the documentation put into place to actually allow them to do that. And so they've actually gone to Arizona Department of Water Resources. They've done all the modeling. The modeling is actually basin wide, but specifically under their project, ADWR, Arizona Department of Water Resources, has signed off saying that, yeah, they agree that land out there has 80,000 acre feet per year available for 100 years. So it was actually 80 million gallons or acre feet of water available, but they to make it a sustainable supply, they have to do that lens of 100 years. So that's all been modeled. They've agreed. It's actually, that was what was sort of, I wouldn't say delaying the project, but a lot of the effort with them is to actually get the state to buy off on that modeling. So there's more water out there than the basin. This is what's actually available to that property, the Harquahala Valley land users group. They're talking about planning it for 3 infrastructure phases because 88,000 acre feet is a lot of water. And what they're trying to do is sell off this, and the town, again, our contract with them allows us access to some of that. We've actually only requested 500 acre feet in the project overall. We thought that was our first buy-in. But they've already done the mapping out of the infrastructure of how they can get access to it. It makes sense to actually do it in 3 phases. They have to actually cross the I-10. They actually have to do a new structure that would get that water into the CAP canal. So that's all being mapped out. There is a non-disclosure agreement, so I can explain some of it, but I can't get into a lot of details on that. But just suffice to say that they've done a lot of engineering and they've updated a lot of that engineering, so they know how to make it physically work. And it's really the goal for or the benefits of the goal of this project is it helps us utilize the wheeling capacity in the Central Arizona project that we have by our unmet NIA and our portion of our municipal industrial supply that Central Arizona project can't supply with Colorado River water. So we actually have capacity that we can wheel it through. And we've talked to Central Arizona project, and they agree that's what we can do. We're not trying to add extra water to the canal. And some of the participants have had that discussion with them. We're trying to utilize and just firm up, as Brad indicated, if we didn't have this shortage coming, the town's water supplies would look good. The shortage was what's driving us into this. And we're not going it alone. There are actually other jurisdictions already in the project. Last year, the city of Buckeye purchased just under 6,000 acre feet, made their purchase, and Queen Creek purchased 5,000 acre feet. And Queen Creek is actually set to make 2 more purchases this year, one next month, and then one in, I think, September or August. In total, they'll have another 12,000 acre feet. So they'll be all in it about 17,000 acre feet. So we're not going it alone here. And, the work that Buckeye and Queen Creek did on the project actually helped get it to the point where Arizona Department of Water Resources has signed off on the availability. So again, what's the town looking to do? Purchasing 500 acre feet. And we picked that number because if you go back to my planning slide, we need more than that to meet our water resources. But, the town, if we had a boatload of money, we'd go out and buy it all and secure it and sit on it, but we don't. So we have to be realistic. But 500 acre feet pushes us out. We've got the bridge to get us out for the next number of years, which depending, if we get access to Arizona Water Banking Authority, that bridge could actually last us potentially for the next decade. So, so that's something to put in place. So do we need this right now, or do we want to have it secured and available to the town? The 500 acre feet of groundwater, and it's a 100-year supply. So it's 500 acre feet per year for 100 years. Unlike the Bartlett Dam, which is variable in flow, we're not sure. Again, the average was 286, but we could get wet years. In good wet years on the Verde River, we'll have more than that water. We can, figure out a way to store that. So we'll get some banking, but in the dry years, we'll have less than that. So the variability. This is a secure water supply for the town, 500 acre feet per year for 100 years. The contractual value is $11.25 million. So it's a big thing the town is considering. And that's the discussions next week is we need to come to a conclusion. Do we want to be in this project? The due diligence phase ends next Friday, the 15th. And then after the due diligence, then we just have to secure the financing to allow us to complete the purchase by February 15th. So we've put our $50,000 in earnest money down. If the town elects not to move forward with the project after next week, then we get that money back, the $50,000. If we don't, that $50,000 stays with the project, but then effectively we're in breach of contract so that's why we're driving this, and we have to make a decision by next week. We've already made an application to Arizona Department of Water Resources to authorize us to import this water. So that process is ongoing. There's been ongoing discussions. Michelle's really led the charge on that one. So we're following the footsteps of others with Queen Creek and Buckeye already doing this. And the next question, I'd ask, and hopefully you're thinking about, is how do we get access to this water? So there is a common infrastructure project being discussed out there that would utilize some of the existing wells. They're talking about drilling some new wells, and then they're going to pipe them together. All that engineering's been done. So they have the higher level preliminary. It's actually more than preliminary engineering. They've mapped out. They've got easements mapped out. They know the size of the pipelines to get all the way through production capacity to get 80,000 acre feet of groundwater for this large basin into the Cap Canal. So they've mapped out all that. The best estimate that we have right now is it'd be 3 to 5 years to construct all that infrastructure. So we wouldn't see that until that common infrastructure. The town can't do this lift ourselves. And ironically, a lot of the wells out there, that's public information on some of the wells within the project boundary, a lot of their wells out there are actually producing 2,000 acre feet a year. So if I got access to one of those wells, I could actually meet the town's obligations for groundwater, for water resources into the future. But we need to get access to that. And we need to get that water into the Cap Canal to get benefit to the town itself. But there's a lot of things that we have to consider, that we're not going in this with, our eyes, blinded saying, oh, that's our one solution. There's a lot of things, and we're trying to pull together all that information, allow the council and with the public's input to decide that. Access to the physical infrastructure, to physically accessing this water, we don't know that cost. When we signed on to the project back in October, there was anticipation that before the end of the last calendar year in December, we were going to get a briefing by the group that's actually looking to do the common infrastructure. They have now deferred that meeting. I'll be attending that meeting on Thursday. So I'll get a briefing on Thursday to know what that ongoing operational costs of getting access to this water. If you look at the cost of the water at $11.2 million, because that's for 100 years and effectively per acre foot per year, that's only $225 per acre foot. It's actually relatively inexpensive. The problem for the town is we have to come up with all the money up front. How do we do that within our budgets? How does this fit within our other planning efforts? We've talked about the bridges that we've worked on that we think will help us get out a number of years. So do we need to do this right now? Can we wait? You know, we've learned a lot about the project, but is this the right project at the right time for us? How are we going to make this fund? Fund it. You know, everybody's probably aware that town's utility funds are not true enterprise funds, and the enterprise funds means that they're fully self-supporting. The town has helped support the utilities since making the purchase of the utilities, and that was a decision made. We're trying to wean ourselves away from that. But when you have things like this, we don't have a reserve set aside to make that. So it's either the general fund having to do a loan to the utility, and or we go out and get a new private bank loan and figure that out. What that would be, that again, the debt service ratio cost on doing that is that in the interest of the town. And then who's going to pay for the purchase? That's been a discussion point. Is it, right now it's the existing customers making that purchase for future to both secure with 20%, we're good. So it's really the future customers that are going to benefit from this. But if we're at a 25% cut in the Colorado River, it's actually some of the existing customers need to help pay for this because that's their water. So, but who's making that? So we have to make those decisions. Is it a combination of that? Right now, and I'm going to talk about the rates. We've done some modeling with what we think some numbers might be. And then we've looked at, right now the town charges new water connections a capacity fee. The cost of the water resources is not built into that. So we'd probably want to update those capacity fees and or develop its own water resource capacity fee. We can't do that legally under state statutes until we have a cost to attribute to that. So we're in this gray area until we pick a project and go with that. Then we can develop the water resource capacity fee to allow us then the new connections as people connect onto the system to pay for that. So we know that's got something we have to do, but we actually have to get the solid information to allow us to do that capacity fee study. So we do have issues. Harquahala, I'll leave it, there's questions. And it's not a done deal. And council has a hard decision to make, and hopefully staff, we can give them as much information so they can make an educated decision. But one of the reasons for having this meeting tonight was to explain what we're dealing with. And I'll stop off by talking about utility rates. So on tonight's agenda is the conclusion of the update to the utility rates study. So why do we even need to look at our rates? Well, the cost of operating the water system is always in flux. We have operation, maintenance, and capital costs that we need to pay for. Operational costs, chemical costs, electrical costs, those increase. Our staffing costs go up. Just general maintenance on the system, just running our pumps, they wear out. We need to replace them. And the capital, that's the investment the town's making to improve the system beyond what we bought. When we bought the systems, again, it was end of 2006, we bought Desert Hills, and followed very quickly by, I think it was March of 27 that we bought Cave Creek Water. There was reports done. It showed that, there needed to be some capital investments in the system to improve that. And with our new master plan, that really helped us solidify what those projects are and helped us look at the system and what we need to improve. That's pipelines, that's new booster pumps, it's other improvements, improving the water treatment plant, let alone just general maintenance. So all those costs go up. So we have to continue to balance those balls and get rates sufficient to allow us to pay for that. And the 2020, just shortly after I started, and I don't want you to attribute my starting with the town being the utility rate increases started, but it happens to coincide. We did the first increases over a decade. It's hard to the town. We were running the system without significant increases to customers paying for that operation of the system for over a decade. That's a long time to go. A lot of municipalities and a lot of utilities went through that. Private utilities, actually, they're a little more on this, but a lot of public utilities made that decision. My prior employer was at City of Avondale, and they went over a decade too between their rate increases, and we got behind on theirs. So, because people are very sensitive to that of the rate increases, but you can only run the operation so far. So we had to go through get a reset. And then we also had to do, at the time, we did a single year rate increase. We had a number of things we were trying to develop with that, and we got that put in place. So in 21, we got that funding put in place. And then in 22, we actually had to revisit that again, largely because and going into 2020 and into 21, we didn't know what was going to happen with 550 of our customers. Those are the Carefree customers. At the end of 21, we knew what was going to happen. Carefree had moved forward with moving those customers onto their system, which now, as of about a month and a half ago, they finally did the last disconnect. That was almost $1 million in revenue that we were losing. So while they got the water resources, which was to supply them by contract, we reduced our operating costs a little bit. But we had so much sunk cost already. It didn't really lower our operations cost, but we were losing $1 million in revenue a year. So we had to account for that. We had to look at how Desert Hills was being functionally handled, because actually in 2020, for the first time, we actually charged differential rates for Cave Creek and Desert Hills. In 22, we reinforced that a little further, saying, hey, the Desert Hills customers, they're reliant on the town's surface water supplies, because when we bought Desert Hills, it didn't have a surface water supply. They didn't have an M&I subcontract, CAP subcontract. They were well water. So it's not fair that Cave Creek, they use some of our water resources, not pay for that, and also help pay for the operation and improvements in the Cave Creek system, make sure that we can continue to send that water to them. So that was the wheeling rate. We addressed that in 22. And then we actually asked at the time for 6 years of rates to give us some stability looking forward of what the rates may be and how we could get revenues. So we weren't doing 1 year and having to keep coming back at it. And council authorized that. The problem with the out years, we didn't know what projects we needed. So in case of Desert Hills Water and Cave Creek Water, we didn't know the out year increases, which were coming through now, is that they were very low, if negligible. So that's where we're at right now in 26. We're trying to look at, obviously, and even when we did 22, we talked about the master plan is being done. We'll probably come with a whole new list of projects, because I'll be honest, the CIP capital program that I put together before that was based on my understanding of the system. We needed to go through the evaluation to prove what we needed to do. That's what the 24 master plan helped identify. We wanted to work on a council goal, which is to create a true enterprise fund where the utilities are self-sufficient and they weren't reliant on general fund. We can't get there day one, but how do you work towards that? It's incremental steps. And we wanted to strengthen the conservation efforts. That's what's ongoing right now, and you'll hear more tonight with Sherry's presentation. Is, we looked at, again, we can't continue to ratchet up the rates. That's what we heard back from feedback from the general public and Utility Advisory Board. So the town looked at the customer base, and since so much of our residential customers are actually low water users, we set a new rate tier. It used to be 10,000 and below. 0 to 10,000 was one rate. We looked at the customer base and said, there's actually a lot of customers who are very good water stewards that are using less than 4,000 gallons a month. So let's not penalize them. So they're actually, I think there's a little bit of a decrease for those customers, and then it starts going up from there. At the top end, we did look at the upper rate tier, and it used to be customers over 50,000 gallons got the highest water rate. That's now been ratcheted down to customers. The highest rate tier we're going to have now 40,000. And Brad laughed at me when I told him that, because his experience as City of Flagstaff, I think their top rate was 18,000, or is it 11,000? That was an upper tier. So something we can look at in the future, and that's something we do want to continue to look at. But we've pulled that down, again, helping those people who are good stewards of the water, and then putting more of the burden on those higher water users. So tonight's council meeting is the final hearing in that, with the rates going into effect in February. And what we're trying to do with this rate increase is we're trying to generate an additional 6% of revenue on the water system specifically for the next 2 years. So effectively, we're resetting the 22 study, the last couple of years of that 22 study. I'll leave you with the fact that, I have to say that this won't be the last rate study we go through, because we factored in some water resources costs into this rate study, but we still have so many unknowns. We don't know what it's going to be and what the cost is going to truly be. So we picked one project and tried to model it around that. But as we get more clarity on what the town's water resource solution will be, we can add that back in. And most other jurisdictions either have completed recent rate studies or are working on rate studies. And everywhere I go to meetings, they're always talking about that as they hone in on things like water resources. Again, all the participants in the Bartlett Dam project, as those costs keeps going up, they're trying to figure out, can they stay in the project and how can they pay for that? So this is a common in the industry right now, and specifically to Arizona and really specifically to the Phoenix metro area, because of what's coming with the Colorado River. And then just construction costs continue to escalate on behalf of our utilities. Everything, it gets more expensive, and wages go up, et cetera. So with the new rates, we're updating the bulk water rates, the wheeling rate between the two companies. So the calculations have been updated so that, again, the Cave Creek customers are helping, the Desert Hills customers are paying for a proportional share of the Cave Creek improvements that help make sure that we have secure water supplies and secure water infrastructure, more so to keep them wet. We're looked at the boosted rates, and that's some people might not aware of that. The way the town system set up is that our water treatment plant boosts into the town core. That's our pressure zone 7. Anybody who needs to get a boost above pressure zone 7 then gets charged a new rate to pay for the extra cost of boosting that water. From the town core down to the Carefree Highway and out to Desert Hills, most of those customers, to the customers immediately along Cloud Road, are actually fed by pressure reducing valves. So we actually burn energy to get that water down to them. But there are some customers in Desert Hills that we have to put that water either into another reservoir to then get boosted out again. So we came up with new rates. It actually went down for most of Desert Hills customers because logistically, that's how the systems work out there. There's only a handful of booster stations, actually 2 major booster stations out there that feed most of the customers. And the cost of operating those is a lot less than the small booster stations that I have on the side of Black Mountain to boost the water up there. So that was a reset. The change that happened is debt funding of the capital program. Prior to this, and there were some changes done, some of the town's general fund revenue was being set aside to actually help pay for the capital program. So that's been a reset. That's the general fund subsidies had really been minimized, and I've tried to get us to that. And we've also set internal service fees. Before, the town actually, as a utility, we paid for a couple of the finance staff to help do the billing and all that, but we weren't in reality paying for our fair share of the use of, me going in and bugging Grady every day on a water resource issue was not being charged back to the utility, or my work on with the attorneys was, but everything else. So those internal service fees are to set an equity level. The utility should be paying for a fair share of our uses of our other town infrastructure, or our staff. Again, I wish I could say this is the last one, but we need to continually look at this, and we will continue to look at it as we look at our operational maintenance costs. And as we learn more about the town's water resources future, we'll continue to look at that. So summary, wrap it all up. I've been talking for a long time, and you guys are probably sick of hearing me. So we do want to get to questions and answer this because it's a forum. We've been working for several years to address the shortages. We know it's coming. We're not going into the tunnel and watching the train come and barreling down at us. We've been thinking about this, and we think we have good solutions to the town's water shortages. We've done things like going into our town code. In 2021, people might not remember the water resource policy. The town's actually been looking, the first policy was put in place in 2017. We updated it in 21. That's the policy that actually put a volumetric limit on new customers, half an acre foot for most single-family customers, and also commercial customers, and also stopped new meters out in Desert Hills unless there was a contractual or statutory obligation. Big change for the town at that point. We also did updates to our water. In 22, we actually changed town code to add the water shortage and drought management. So now there's the tools are in town code that if we get into a shortage situation, we already have the list of things that we can go and do to help require people to save more water. We completed the 24 master plan, which again helped bring all these planning efforts together. And the master plans are great because they look at the infrastructure, but they look at the water resources. And an integrated master plan looks at all the systems together, including our wastewater system, and helps clarify what that needs to be. It helps identify what needed water resources, help us to identify what capital improvements we need to do. And we've been working for a number of years on a number of solutions. And I'll leave you with that, there's not one solution for this simple water solution for the town. I wish there was. that we just go write one check and we're done, and one of the things, again, the town really needs to start looking at diversifying our water portfolio to help get our water security. What's happening in the Colorado River right now in discussions of the shortage, the next conversation that always comes up in even these same meetings is this is the first cut. What's the next one's going to be? So we don't know. And the cuts may not be just because of the cuts to allocation subcontracts. The basin itself has physically changed. The amount of water on the river changes year to year based on snowpack. So there's could be years where there's, we're 27 or 29 years into a drought on the river. Could that continue, or could there be even lower values to the point that they can't get the deliveries to us physically, even though there's an allocation? So, that's something for the federal government to interject on and say, what can they do to keep the contracts whole? But they say there might not be the water on the river this year, and you all have to take an additional cut this one year. So, by getting diversity in our water portfolio, we help bridge those in the future. So we don't get into such a severe situation. So again, I've talked long enough, and then we want to take some questions. So we do have some written questions, and we do have we can go around. Want to take some? We'll take some of those, and I'll stop and go through the written ones that we received. Is there any over there?
Thank you. Is this on?
Yeah.
Thank you very much for your cogent, Sean and Brad, presentation. Pretty excellent. I agree with that last summary statement, which is there is no simple solution, and I hope that the town council takes into consideration that. Well, my big concern is not so much Bartlett, is the alternative Harquahala project. I'm very concerned that we don't know the costs. We truly don't. Massive potential costs. Quality of water, treatment, right? Transportation, drilling, infrastructure, maintenance, massive amounts of dollars, not including over $11 million that apparently, and by the way, this is not, I'm not really criticizing. I'm saying let us be cautious, please. $11 million, 250,000 non-refundable dollars prior to having any of those costs, which you put on one of your slides. I'm not sure that's the best deal-making situation that anyone, any company, any entity or municipality would want to do. So the pressure of making this deal with a date certain, my understanding is February 15th, I think. The money has to go to the owners, non-refundable. And if we decide it's not really going to work, or we find out there's issues, we're kind of screwed. And I just wanted to say that. One last thing. Sorry, guys, I'm going on and on, but I'm cautioning the council here. Also, my understanding is the owners of the land are the Wolfswinkel family. I do believe that they were convicted in federal court a number of years ago for crimes of land swindling. Not reconstituted. They have not been habituated, or what is the word? Rehabilitated. I don't think they've been rehabilitated. And so the question again is caution, caution, caution. Everybody that went into business with them ended up in a legal situation. Thank you. We need water. Let's do it the right way, no matter what. Thank you very much.
We have forms over here if you want to also fill out your question. They will be answered, and I'll post them online.
Yeah.
Once we're done.
At one point, I point out, I was making the purchase and getting access to that groundwater. The town is not just left. We'd have paperwork. We'd have a water resource. So there's a thought of, if we hold that, is that an asset that we can use and we can sell that off to someone else in the future? So, yeah, I understand that we might be able to do that. So that'd be, it's a resource that we would have. So we'd be buying that. Well, it's paper water. And my understanding is the Harquahala Valley landowners, you brought up some of the ownership group, but they're not the ones involved in the common infrastructure. So they're basically selling off. The work's been done to have the state sign off on how much water's there, but they're not moving ahead with the project. They've helped assemble the land. They've put the easements in place. they're not the ones building the infrastructure. So we're going in with our eyes open on that. So I just want to make sure people are aware of that.
The project documents as they exist now, it's a very restricted source because it's subject to the state's order that a particular party has the authorization, and there's not an easy way to unwind it. So no, you can't just freely sell it like an asset, like if it was a real estate lot. There's always a possibility it could be unwound and redirected to another party, but that would involve all sorts of government approvals and potentially private party approvals. And so there's no way to say to you today, yeah, it's doable, because we would have to go through and see if we would have a problem doing it.
Early in your presentation, you said that Cave Creek we won the lottery, that we are most severely affected. And we see demonstration from that, Phoenix and the new city that they're building next to us. Originally, the town Cave Creek did operate on well water, and we were thoroughly induced to get off groundwater and onto surface water and to participate with CAP, and that happened at great expense. Or the town owned the system, but nevertheless, we bought the system, so we did pay for that. So it seems to me that different municipalities are affected to different levels here. Can we go to CAP and say, hey, remember that deal we cut? Because if we are more severely affected than Phoenix, where Phoenix can't even feel it, is there any equity at CAP to somehow maybe not get us cut as much as a Phoenix? So that's my question, but I have a statement too. Brief, I promise. Every time we talk about water, I like to talk about rainwater collection. I now have over 2.5 years experience doing that personally. I collected over 15,000 gallons with 2 tanks. That is a better than 10% reduction for most customers. And you can start doing that tomorrow. It's available. And once you put in the infrastructure, it's free. So thank you.
Yeah, good point. Some interesting. So like harvesting, that's something that through water conservation, we could do some outreach on to help that. Again, other valley cities have handed out rain barrels to help facilitate that. It's depending on, last year was a dry summer. So sometimes we get a lot of water, sometimes you don't. And then it's a good augmentation for outdoor water use. But that is something could help reduce people's demands. Getting back to your first question, yeah, we are, because the town's, because of how reliant we are, because we hadn't, even the water company stopped using a lot of its wells after 1990, after they made the investment in the CAP pipeline, the treatment plant, and started to do that. And part of that was based on the fact that how the aquifer works up here. Even before that, there was discussions at the state level of how viable is the Cave Creek Carefree Aquifer. Ironically, we're at the shallow end of it, and it actually gets deeper as you go towards Carefree Scottsdale border, and that's the deepest part of the aquifer. So there's been discussions with Cave Creek, the Cave Creek Water Company, with Carefree Water Company, and Scottsdale to help preserve that area. The state can't regulate the exempt wells that go into the aquifer. With the private wells that people can drill, it's called an exempt well, but they actually have been working for decades with the 3 municipal providers up here to try and preserve the aquifer up here. Could we bring them online? I think we can. How long will they work, and what water quality are we going to get out of them? We've tested 3 of the wells. We think that'll help us with our bridge solution. But looking back historically, I was able to put together about a 20-year usage on those wells, and there's a lot of variability and a lot of drop in the well production. And we know that water quality, arsenic specifically, is one of the constituents they had to deal with that the old water company was running into dealing with. So they were actually blending it. So there's a lot of things to consider with that. And yeah, there have been conversations all the way up to the governor's office. Our mayor, on behalf of the council, we presented letters. We've actually met with the governor's office. We've met with the Arizona Department of Water Resources, Tom Brzezinski, the director, one-on-one. We've actually met with the Arizona Water Banking Authority. We've met with the CAP staff on the very issue you're relating is, this is a real wet water issue for Cave Creek. Can you treat us differently? Legally, they always say we're trying to treat everybody the same, but I'll say that our name is coming up in conversations statewide. They've heard our story. They know this is a wet water issue for Cave Creek, and the fact that we're getting these other cities to partner with us in this exchange agreement is because they heard that, and they're willing to do exchange agreements with us to allow us access to our water storage credits. And even the state, again, we were out of the meeting with the Arizona Department of Water Resources, and I know Tom didn't know I was there because I was sitting on the side, and he mentioned Cave Creek. When he said this is a real wet water solution, Cave Creek is an example, and I happened to lean forward and said thanks for doing that. So they've heard it. They know that. And so we're trying to figure out the legal mechanisms, how that will work out, because they have to look at statewide. They have to look at all, again, the municipal industrial subcontracts for the Central Luzerne project. I think there's 54 of them. They have, how do you treat everybody differently, and how does that work out? And I use the analogy, it's funny, we're a small company. It's very important to you guys that I can provide water to you, but we're almost a decimal place rounding error to a lot of these water companies. We talk about City of Phoenix. So, but we go into conversations with people that I'm surprised they're opening the door to us because they heard our story. So, yeah.
This is our last question. Otherwise, please fill out a card and we'll make sure you get the answers.
If the town's been banking water for the future, then what would prevent the town from easily accessing what you've been banking? I don't understand the process of accessing bank water.
Great question, and Brad will provide more of that. So, in effect, we've actually been banking with Central Luzerne Project. Central Luzerne Project has physical areas that they're recharging the aquifer. They've done studies. They've picked locations that they're actually putting it, and they use spreading basins. So they use large basins and they're putting that water in, and it's percolating into the ground and recharging that. The facilities that they run, and the town. Geographically, it's not good for us to recharge up here. We don't have a good location to recharge in the town core area. It's just not viable. The groundwater table actually is surprising hard because perched water on the base. Down south, we could do some recharge, but it's actually going to go south of Carefree Highway the next day. So how do we recover that is the next portion of that. So when you look at groundwater recharge, you have to look at, can it get absorbed into the aquifer? There's rules on what you can do, where you can place those, and then can you withdraw it? So it's the physical access to that stored water, the water we've banked. Again, the two locations that we have access to right now I have stored water are the Hieroglyphics facility, 163rd Avenue in Surprise, north of Grand Avenue, and the other one is in Peoria at Happy Valley Road, 107th. So, and that's why the exchange agreements, those municipalities actually have wells within the zone of influence that they can recover that water. And that's the exchange agreements, is that they will run the groundwater wells, pull our credits out of the ground. They'll account for it, and we'll do a transfer with them of our credits to them for that year, and they'll leave water on the Central Luzerne project that they won't take off the water and come down to us. So it's moving the water around based on the fact that when you recharge, it's not where you have physical access, and we're trying to get that next connection to the physical access to that water resource for the town. I'm not sure you want to elaborate more, Brad.
We ask for it, they can't say no.
Well, so there's two pieces to that. One is the agreements that you have to come up with, agreements between city to city or, town to city. And then the other is the infrastructure. And so since those other cities have infrastructure, so they can say no. So because each goes to their council, the agreement, the legal piece to that goes to individual councils, and we're working through, and it also goes with the Department of Water Resources. So we're working with all of those to the two cities as well as the department to allow us to get access to their infrastructure so we can get access to that city's CAP water to get delivered to us. So it's not as simple as you would think. It's actually very complicated, both from an infrastructure and agreement perspective, but that's exactly, if you looked at the slides or if you download them later, those are the exchange agreements that one of the things that Sean had asked me to do and I was on their master plan was to, how do we bridge this? We know we need something long-term. Can you give us some space so we have time, council has time to legitimize it and figure out what it is you need to do, or what solution that Sean mentioned. And so that's when I started working with my contacts in these other cities and how, hey, we can do this. Are you willing to help this town? Yes, which was wonderful. Now we're just working through those terms and to finalize those. And actually, Sean and I just met this morning with one of the other cities because we want to do this twice at the two different recharge projects. And we're on the cutting edge of doing this, as Sean mentioned before, because of the reasons that we're talking about with the impacts to the shortage and this community.
We need to bring this to a close unless you have a final statement.
Well,
We can post those online.
yeah, I'll post these online. I've got 3 here that are tying back to water rate increases. So those will be discussed more tonight. So again, I gave a preview of that. And one question that got written down had to do with the new hotel project in town. So there is a project moving forward for a hotel near the post office. They actually have what we call a contractual right. That property actually does have a certificate of assured water supply. So when I brought that forward, talking about fewer obligations, that's a contractual obligation that we had signed off for. That property, if you're not aware of it, is tied to the Galloway Ridge project. It was actually one project at one time. So Galloway Ridge, the 70 lot residential subdivision, is actually phase 1. Phase 2 was always going to be the hotel. So that the amount of water set aside for that project is that's a contractual obligation. That's when I brought that first table up of what do we have as obligations. You know, there are some subdivisions that have vacant lots in them that actually help pay for the system that got to the point that we now actually have. So we're honoring that contract with them. So.
Well, thank you very much, everyone. We appreciate your time for being here, and I hope this information was useful. The video will be online tonight, and I'll post it on the website as well. And then all the questions that we can answer, I'll keep updating the website as more and more of those come in. So please check the website. The homepage will have a link to it. And hopefully we answer all your questions. If there's still questions afterwards, I'll make sure that you have an email link you can send to communications@cavecreekaz.gov, and I'll make sure that the guys get it so they can answer it. So it's on YouTube, and it will also be on our website. Yes, it's town hall something, but there'll be a link to it off our website. So, but again, we have a council meeting. If you want to stick around for that fun show, it starts at 5. And I thank you again for being here.